80% rule. Please, what does that mean?
Well, it was inspired by the Okinawan adage, hara hachi bu, which essentially means stop eating when your stomach is 80% full. It actually goes back to Confucius. And it's very much in step with the notion of intermittent fasting. It's, that when you feed monkeys as much food as they want compared to a group of monkeys that get 30% fewer calories, the underfed monkeys live longer. And I believe it's the same thing with humans. So
the challenge, of course, is that there's this delay between us being actually full and feeling full.
Right. So the blue zone approach is not necessarily hara hachi bu is what they say that instead of a prayer. So it's this sort of natural place to kind of insert a habit. I'm not a huge fan of habits, but they work better if they're coupled with another activity. But the way hara hachi bu shows up in the blue zone context is they tend to pre-plate their food and then put the rest away instead of eating family style, which occasions eating fewer calories.
And how does that affect the speed of eating? Oh, so in other words, I have a limited amount on my plate.
Yeah, it affects the amount of food you're going to eat. So instead of thinking about stop eating when your stomach is 80% full, there's only enough food on your table to fill your stomach 80%.
Yeah.
They tend to eat off of smaller plates. Cornell Food Lab found that if you're eating off a smaller plate, your brain, you unconsciously eat fewer calories. You never see a TV in a blue zone kitchen. Yeah. They tend to eat, huge breakfast and a medium-sized lunch and little or no dinner. So the impact is, if you look at their dietary surveys over time, until about the year 2000, they were eating about 80% the calories that Americans are eating right now.
And then modernization hit them.
Yeah, as soon as the American standard American diet shows up in these blue zones, longevity goes out the back door. Yeah.
Wow. A couple of tricks that I've learned from interviewing folks. One is the order in which you eat your food matters. And so I've made this a part of my every meal. So first of all, when you go to a restaurant and they serve the bread and wine first, that's like the worst thing you could eat at the beginning of your meal, right? It just makes you hungrier. So I eat veggies first. So I'll literally eat all the vegetables on my plate first, which slows the digestive tract. And then I'll eat my protein. And then I've actually gotten away from all carbs. But if you're going to eat the carbs last, because your digestive, first of all, you'll be more full. And then it's slowed the veggies and the protein have slowed your digestive process a little bit. So I'm not sure if you've seen that in any form.
It's a dangerous message to tell people not to eat carbs.
Okay, please.
Both jelly beans and lentil beans are carbs, and
I had a great lentil soup last night. I love lentils,
and those are carbs, by the way.
Okay, a bean. So let's talk about beans 1 second.
Okay, so in blue zones, I wrote this book called.
And I should have said high glycemic index carbs. I minimize.
But your audience knows what that. But most Americans don't know what the hell high glycemic carbs means. And you tell people, by the way, even bread in blue zones, they're eating a ton of bread. I'm in the longest lived men in the history of the world in Sardinia until about 1990, 60% of their caloric intake came from breads and pastas. Mm-hmm. So it's very hard to square that. But of course, it's sourdough bread, and sourdough bread actually lowers the glycemic load of a meal. But people they say bread, oh my God, and a dangerous carb. So it's too much of a blunt instrument to tell people not to eat carbs. We need a better word.
Correction appreciated. So thank you for that. I appreciate your wisdom.
But it was more a reason to sort of slip in there some, what people really eat to live a long time. But anyway, back to your question.
So honestly, I want to go back to what type of beans and are you seeing as important to be part of your diet?
So all blue zones are eating about a cup of beans a day. And in Okinawa, they show up as the soybeans and tofu. In Costa Rica, they're black beans. In Icaria, Greece, they're mostly lentils and garbanzos. In Sardinia, it's fava beans. It doesn't seem to matter, but people who eat a cup of beans a day also live about 4 years longer. And I can't draw a causal relationship, but I can tell you it stacks the deck in favor of longevity. I hear this all the time. We need to get more fresh fruits and vegetables into the inner city. No, that's the absolute wrong thing to do. Why? They're expensive. They're not shelf stable. And people in the inner city don't know what the hell to do with fresh fruits and vegetables. You give them beans and rice. And by the way, you take a bean and a grain, you get all the amino acids, you get a whole protein. Beans and corn tortilla, beans and pasta. Those foods together, you're giving people 95% of the fiber, the complex carbohydrates, the protein they need, a lot of micro minerals. They're cheap. And the most important thing is you can make them taste delicious. Those are the longevity foods I think we should be promoting first.
Yeah. Which gets to number 5 here, which is a plant-based diet. Meat eaten in small amounts, 5 times per month. That is a small amount.
That comes from a meta-analysis of 155 dietary surveys done in all 5 blue zones over the last 90 years. And I did it under the aegis of Harvard University, Walter Willett. And that amounts to about 20 pounds of meat a year. The average American eats about 240 pounds of meat a year.
Wow.
And there's no question that quantity of meat is doubling, tripling, or even quadrupling your chances of cardiovascular disease and cancers of the GI tract, breast and prostate cancer. So a little bit of meat, probably not a problem, but the levels we eat in America for sure are driving chronic disease.
Is eggs fall into the same category there?
In blue zones, on average, they're eating about 3 eggs a week. They're pasture raised. They're typically the chicken running around the yard. They're home production. And, eggs seems to be in low quantity, they're probably neutral, but in high quantities, they're for sure a negative.
Yeah, I'm trying to balance protein, plant-based protein versus animal. And it's so much easier to get the amount of protein I'm looking for from animals.
Yeah, but when you remember, you're also ingesting their hormones, you're ingesting the antibiotics. You probably say, "Well, I eat grass-fed meat." Sure, but that's only about 2% or 4%.
I don't eat beef.
But, you're right. You don't eat meat at all, right?
But I do eat chicken. I do eat fish, and I mean salmon in particular. I want to come back to fish in a moment, but I recently I do toxin testing all the time, and my arsenic levels were high, and I'm like, what's going on? And my physician at Fountain Life said it's chicken. It's coming from the amount of chicken you're eating.
The number one driver of chronic disease in America is our sodium intake, and the number one source of sodium in America is chicken.
Really?
Yeah, it's the billion chickens we eat. So.
By the way, folks, do you know how many chickens there are on the planet? This number just blows me away. It's like 37 billion chickens on planet Earth. We're a planet of chickens. It's crazy.
Yeah, and chicken is not a significant source of protein in any of the blue zones. You be careful of chicken. And we think, it's the other white meat. But when you look at the subcellular level of saturated fat, it's on par with beef. And 100% of chicken has feces in it. And E. coli. And
so what meat products would you recommend based on your work?
None. But I will tell you, and I'll be honest, people in blue zones, the most common meat is pork. And it's always eaten as a celebratory food. It's always home raised. It's not industrial raised. And you don't need meat I haven't eaten meat in 12 years. And wow. My doctor tells me I'm his healthiest patient.
Yeah. You look great. Tell me about fish.
Blue zones, they're consuming about 4 servings of fish a week. It's typically mid-chain fish like anchovies or sardines. That's sort of the cheap fish that rarely makes it to our grocery stores here in America. Yeah. And interestingly, in blue zones, even though they're on islands, I
would have thought a lot more fish.
Yeah. But for example, in Sardinia, they're 15 miles away from the ocean. You can see the ocean, but they never go down there. It used to be a day's journey to get there. Then you catch the fish, and then by the time they get the fish back up in the village, it stinks. Same with Icaria, by the way, which is in Greece. The blue zone in Icaria is not on the coast, not the coastal city. It's up in like this crater because they had to always hide from the pirates. Okay. So it's sort of a hidden part of Icaria. So they're eating mostly beans and greens, the type of shit we'd weed whack from our backyard. They're making in hortas and these beautiful pies.
I'm familiar. My grandmother used to make that for me. So I had a blue zone diet when I was growing up living at home, and it shifted when I went to medical school. This next one, wine at 5. So I am seriously curious about this because a lot of the science data today says, listen, alcohol has no added benefits and it's detrimental. This is not what science is saying, but this is what the blue zones do. 2 glasses per day. Interesting.
Yeah. I'm investigating a place where it's more like 4 glasses a day. So I'm familiar with the epidemiology, which everybody cites, that there's no safe level of alcohol. But they also factor in things like falls and drunk driving and fatal accidents. It's not always just and there's some, I would say them weak studies on alcohol and gray matter in your brain and so forth. But I know that 90% of people are making it into their 90s and 100s in all the blue zones except Loma Linda are drinking every day of their life. They're drinking homemade wine, a couple glasses. It's almost always with a meal or always with food. It's almost always in the presence of other people. And their life expectancy at middle age is 10 years longer than us. Mm-hmm. So I know for certain that drinking a little bit is not mutually exclusive with living a long, healthy life. Could they live 2 or 3 more years without drinking it? Maybe. Yeah. But maybe not. We don't know for sure. All I know is, a little bit doesn't seem to get in the way of living a long time in blue zones.